This is one of the most dramatic skulls from our prehistoric planet. It belonged to a plant-eating dinosaur called Triceratops.
Earth, during the early Jurassic, was a planet in transition. The great supercontinent Pangaea was no longer stable. Deep fractures stretched across the land as tectonic forces slowly pulled the world apart. These movements reshaped coastlines, opened new oceans, and altered the flow of air and water across the globe. The result was a warmer, wetter planet, one that favored reptiles more than any other form of life before or since. The climate of the Jurassic was largely greenhouse in nature. Polar ice was absent. Temperatures were mild to hot across most regions, with little seasonal variation. Rainfall increased as shallow seas expanded inland, creating humid environments rich in vegetation. Vast forests of conifers, cycads, ginkgos and tree ferns spread across the continents, feeding enormous populations of herbivores and supporting complex food webs. This world belonged to reptiles. Their physiology gave them a decisive advantage. Reptilian eggs, protected by shells, could be laid on land far from water. Their skin reduced moisture loss, allowing survival in dry and variable environments. Their metabolism required less energy than mammals, enabling them to grow large and endure periods of scarcity. Over millions of years, these traits allowed reptiles to radiate into nearly every ecological niche on Earth. On land, giant reptiles walked, ran, and hunted across floodplains and forests. Some grew longer than buses, weighing many tons, their bodies supported by pillar-like limbs, adapted for size and endurance. Others were lean, fast, and deadly, equipped with sharp teeth and forward-facing eyes that made them efficient predators. Even smaller reptiles thrived, filling roles as burrowers, climbers, and scavengers. The oceans were no less dramatic. As Pangaea split, new coastlines formed, creating shallow continental seas rich in nutrients. Plankton bloomed in warm waters, feeding fish and squid, which in turn supported massive marine reptiles. These creatures evolved streamlined bodies, powerful tails and flippers built for speed and maneuverability. Some hunted near the surface, others dove into darkness, while a few grew so large they became the apex predators of the seas. Above the land and water, the skies were no longer empty. Flying reptiles took advantage of rising warm air currents and open coastal environments. Their wings, formed from stretched membranes supported by elongated fingers, allowed them to glide across vast distances with minimal effort. From the air, they could scan for prey, steal food, or move between isolated ecosystems that ground animals could never reach. The breakup of Pangaea did more than change geography. It isolated populations. As continents drifted apart, reptiles in different regions followed separate evolutionary paths. This isolation led to an explosion of diversity. Similar body plans adapted to different environments, while entirely new forms emerged in response to local conditions. Deserts, wetlands, forests, and coastlines all produced their own giants. Oxygen levels during the Jurassic were sufficient to support large animals, though not as extreme as earlier periods. What mattered more was ecological stability. Mass extinctions had cleared the stage long before, leaving abundant resources and little competition. Reptiles exploited this stability, growing larger over time as successful traits were reinforced through natural selection. Predator and prey existed in a constant evolutionary arms race. Herbivores developed thick hides, sheer size, and herd behavior. Predators responded with stronger jaws, sharper teeth, and cooperative hunting strategies in some species. This balance kept ecosystems productive and resilient, allowing giant reptiles to persist for millions of years without collapse. Daily life in the Jurassic was shaped by sound and movement. Forests echoed with the calls of large animals. Riverbanks were trampled by herds moving between feeding grounds. Coastal waters churned with life as marine predators surfaced to breathe before diving again. Every environment was active, competitive, and dangerous. Yet, this was not a static world. Volcanic activity was common as tectonic plates shifted. Massive lava flows reshaped landscapes, while volcanic gases altered local climates. Sea levels rose and fell repeatedly, flooding lowlands and then retreating. These changes forced reptiles to adapt, migrate, or disappear. Those that survived became even more specialized and dominant. The Jurassic marks a critical chapter in Earth's history because it represents a peak of reptilian rule. Never before had reptiles so completely controlled land, sea, and sky at the same time. Mammals existed, but they were small and largely nocturnal, living in the shadows of giants. Birds had not yet fully emerged. The planet was shaped by scales, claws, teeth, and bone. This was a world optimized for reptiles. Warm temperatures, abundant food, and open ecological space combined to create an age of giants. The Jurassic did not simply belong to dinosaurs alone. It was a wild global experiment in reptilian dominance, one written into stone by fossils scattered across every continent. To understand the Jurassic world awakening is to understand how Earth itself can favor one form of life over all others. Through climate, geography, and time, the planet created the conditions for giant reptiles to rise and rule, and for tens of millions of years, they answered that opportunity with absolute dominance. The rise of giant reptiles during the Jurassic was not an accident. It was the result of long evolutionary pressures acting on a planet that rewarded size, strength, and efficiency. For millions of years before the Jurassic began, reptiles had already survived mass extinctions that eliminated many competitors. Those survivors carried traits that allowed them to take full advantage of the new world forming around them. One of the most important factors behind gigantism was energy efficiency. Reptiles do not burn energy in the same way mammals do. Their metabolism allows them to convert food into body mass more efficiently, especially in warm environments. On a greenhouse planet like Jurassic Earth, this meant reptiles could grow larger without the constant need to eat. A massive body became an advantage rather than a burden. Size offered protection. As predators grew larger, prey species responded by increasing in size as well. A small animal could be killed easily, but a towering herbivore with thick skin and immense weight was far more difficult to bring down. Over generations, natural selection favored individuals that were bigger, stronger, and harder to kill. This gradual escalation pushed many species toward enormous sizes. Abundant food made this possible. Jurassic plant life was vast and productive. Forests stretched across continents, fed by high carbon dioxide levels and steady rainfall. Herbivorous reptiles had access to near limitless vegetation. Their digestive systems evolved to process tough plant material, extracting enough energy to sustain bodies weighing tens of tons. predators followed the same path, growing larger to hunt larger prey. Oxygen levels also played a supporting role. While not at their historical peak, oxygen concentrations were stable enough to support large muscles and active lifestyles. Combined with efficient lungs and air sac systems in some reptiles, this allowed sustained movement despite massive size. These adaptations prevented giants from becoming slow and helpless. Skeletal design was another key factor. Reptilian bones evolved to support weight through vertical limb posture. Instead of sprawling limbs pressed to the ground, many Jurassic giants stood with legs positioned directly beneath their bodies. This column-like structure distributed weight efficiently, reducing stress on joints and allowing movement over long distances without collapse. Growth patterns further encouraged gigantism. Many reptiles continued growing throughout their lives. Unlike mammals, which stopped growing after maturity, Jurassic reptiles could slowly increase in size year after year. Individuals that survived longer became larger, more dominant, and more likely to reproduce. Longevity itself became an evolutionary advantage. Predators also benefited from increased size. Larger jaws could deliver stronger bites. Longer bodies could overpower prey through weight alone. Some predators evolved massive skulls built to crush bone, while others relied on speed combined with size to ambush victims. In either case, being big meant controlling territory and access to food. Competition shaped this process. When multiple species hunted or fed in the same region, size differences reduced direct conflict. Smaller species occupied specialized niches, while giants claimed the most abundant resources. This separation allowed ecosystems to remain stable while still supporting enormous animals. Warm global temperatures were critical. Cold-blooded or partially regulated bodies function best in warm climates. Without ice caps or harsh winters, giant reptiles did not face seasonal food shortages that would have favored smaller bodies. Year-round warmth meant year-round activity and growth. Water availability also mattered. Many giants lived near rivers, lakes, and coastlines. Water supported plant growth and helped regulate body temperature. Some massive reptiles spent much of their time partially submerged, using buoyancy to reduce the strain of gravity on their bodies. This further removed size limits. Isolation caused by continental drift accelerated diversification. As populations became separated, local conditions shaped their growth. In some regions, predators grew larger to hunt equally massive prey. In others, herbivores expanded in size due to reduced predation pressure. These regional experiments in gigantism produced a wide range of giant forms. There were limits. Size came with risks. Large animals required time to mature and were vulnerable when young. Environmental changes could be deadly if food supplies collapsed. Yet during the Jurassic, stability outweighed risk. Ecosystems remained productive long enough for gigantism to thrive. The rise of giants was also a feedback loop. As animals grew larger, landscapes changed, forests were trampled, rivers shifted, migration paths carved permanent routes across continents. These changes further shaped evolution, favoring animals capable of traveling long distances and consuming vast quantities of food. What emerged was a world where giant reptiles were not rare exceptions, but dominant forces. They shaped climate at a local scale, influenced vegetation patterns, and determined which species survived. Size became power, and power ensured survival. The Jurassic did not create giants overnight. It refined them. Through efficiency, abundance, warmth, and time, Earth allowed reptiles to explore the upper limits of size. The result was an age where being enormous was not only possible, but optimal. On Jurassic landmasses, power was measured in mass, height, and reach. The kings of the land were not defined by a single species, but by a range of giant reptiles that dominated different environments. Floodplains, forests, coastal lowlands, and open woodlands each produced their own rulers. Together, they formed a hierarchy of life, where size, strength, and adaptation determined survival. At the top of this hierarchy stood the largest terrestrial predators. These reptiles were built for killing animals nearly their own size. Their skulls were massive, reinforced to withstand extreme stress. Rows of serrated teeth were designed not for chewing, but for slicing flesh and tearing muscle. A single bite could cause catastrophic blood loss. Their necks were thick and muscular, allowing them to shake prey violently or deliver repeated attacks. Vision played a critical role. Forward-facing eyes provided depth perception, essential for judging distance during an attack. These predators relied on ambush more than pursuit. Dense forests and broken terrain offered cover. A sudden charge over a short distance was often enough. Speed over long distances mattered less than explosive power. In the final moments, their bodies balanced strength and mobility. Powerful hind limbs generated force, while long tails acted as counterweights, stabilizing the body during turns or lunges. Despite their size, these predators were not clumsy. Fossilized footprints show controlled movement, deliberate steps, and balance, even on soft ground. They were efficient, not reckless. Below the apex predators were secondary hunters, smaller but still formidable. These reptiles filled roles that required agility and coordination. Some hunted in groups, overwhelming larger prey through repeated attacks. Others specialized in targeting juveniles, sick individuals, or scavenging kills left behind by larger predators. This reduced direct competition and allowed multiple carnivores to coexist in the same ecosystem. Herbivores formed the foundation of land ecosystems. The largest among them reached lengths that rivaled the biggest predators and masses that far exceeded them. Their sheer size acted as armor. Thick skin, reinforced by muscle and connective tissue, made penetrating bites difficult. Bones were dense and strong, capable of supporting immense weight without failure. Feeding strategies varied. Long-necked giants browsed high vegetation, unreachable to others. Their height allowed access to treetops, stripping leaves and branches while standing in place. This reduced competition and let them exploit food sources spread across vast areas. Other herbivores fed lower to the ground, consuming ferns, cycads, and shrubs in enormous quantities. Movement was slow but steady. These animals were built for endurance rather than speed. Migration was common, driven by seasonal changes in vegetation and water availability. As herds moved, they reshaped landscapes. Trails became permanent features. Vegetation patterns shifted under constant grazing pressure. Entire ecosystems adapted around their presence. Defense among herbivores extended beyond size. Some developed thickened skulls, bony plates, or tail structures capable of delivering devastating blows. A single swing from a heavy tail could break bones or deter even the largest predator. Herd behavior added another layer of protection. Adults surrounded juveniles, presenting a wall of mass that was nearly impossible to breach. Juvenile survival was the greatest challenge. Young reptiles were vulnerable to predators for many years before reaching full size. Growth rates were rapid in early life, driven by abundant food and warm climates. Those that survived the first critical years had a high chance of reaching adulthood. Mortality was high, but population stability was maintained through sheer numbers of offspring. Territory-defined dominance. Large predators controlled vast hunting ranges, often overlapping with those of rivals. Confrontations between adults were rare, but intense. Injuries found in fossils suggest bite marks and healed fractures consistent with combat. These encounters were not always fatal, but served to establish dominance and access to resources. Communication likely played a role. Vocalizations, body posture, and visual displays would have reduced the need for constant fighting. Size itself was a signal. A fully grown predator did not need to prove its strength often. Presence alone was enough to claim authority. The relationship between predators and herbivores was not purely violent. It was a dynamic balance shaped by evolution. Predators removed weaker individuals, strengthening herds over time. Herbivores responded with better defenses, forcing predators to adapt in turn. This feedback loop drove continual refinement on both sides. Smaller reptiles filled essential supporting roles. Scavengers cleaned carcasses, reducing disease. Burrowing species aerated soil. Climbers exploited forest canopies, feeding on insects and small animals. Without these supporting species, the giants could not have thrived. The land ecosystem was complex and interdependent. Environment influenced which reptiles became kings in dense forests. Maneuverability mattered more than absolute size in open floodplains. Height and reach provided advantages. Coastal regions supported mixed ecosystems where terrestrial and semi-aquatic reptiles interacted. Dominance was always local, shaped by terrain and resources. Weather patterns also mattered. Heavy rainfall created muddy environments that favored lighter predators and hindered the largest hunters. Dry seasons concentrated animals around water sources, increasing competition and predation. Kingship was not permanent. Even the largest reptiles could be displaced by environmental shifts. Injury was a constant risk. Broken teeth, fractured bones, and infections could end a dominant animal's reign. Survival depended on resilience. Many fossils show healed injuries, evidence that these reptiles could recover from severe trauma, and those that healed gained experience, becoming even more effective hunters or defenders. Longevity reinforced dominance. Large reptiles that survived early life could live for decades. Experience mattered. Knowing migration routes, ambush sites, and seasonal patterns increased success. Younger rivals faced not only size, but intelligence shaped by time. Reproduction ensured continuity. Dominant individuals likely had greater access to mates, passing on successful traits. Nesting sites were chosen carefully, often in areas with natural protection. Although parental care varied, Some evidence suggests guarding behavior, at least during early stages. The kings of Jurassic land were not monsters driven by instinct alone. They were products of their environment, shaped by physics, biology, and time. Their dominance was earned through adaptation, efficiency, and resilience. This balance of power created stability. Ecosystems persisted for millions of years with relatively little disruption. Giants came and went, but the structure remained. Land belonged to reptiles because no other animals could yet challenge their mastery. The Jurassic land was not ruled by chaos. It was ruled by order, enforced through size and strength. Every step of a giant sent vibrations through the ground. Every hunt reinforced the hierarchy. This was a world where survival favored those capable of becoming kings, and Earth provided everything needed for them to rise. Inside a Jurassic forest, life unfolded beneath towering canopies of conifers, ginkgos, and tree ferns. Sunlight filtered through layers of dense foliage, creating a world of shadow and movement. The air was warm and heavy with moisture, filled with the sounds of insects, distant calls, and the steady rhythm of large animals moving through vegetation. This environment was rich, dangerous, and constantly alive. The forest floor was crowded with plant life. Ferns carpeted the ground, while cycads and shrubs filled every open space. Fallen branches and decaying trunks created obstacles and shelter. This complexity supported countless small reptiles, amphibians, insects, and early mammals, all competing for food and hiding from larger predators. Survival depended on awareness and speed. Small reptiles thrived here. Many were agile climbers, using claws and flexible bodies to navigate trunks and branches. Others lived close to the ground, darting between roots and rocks. Camouflage was common. Skin patterns matched bark, leaves, or shadows, making still animals nearly invisible. These adaptations reduced predation and allowed them to exploit food sources that giants ignored. Insects were abundant. Beetles, dragonflies, and other arthropods reached large sizes, feeding on plants and each other. They were a critical food source for smaller reptiles and early mammals. Swarms could strip vegetation quickly, influencing plant growth and distribution. The forest ecosystem was shaped as much by these small creatures as by the giants above them. Larger herbivorous reptiles moved through forests with purpose. Their bodies pushed aside vegetation, opening paths that smaller animals followed. Feeding was constant. Massive jaws stripped leaves and branches, while long necks allowed access to higher growth. These feeding patterns altered forest structure, preventing overgrowth and maintaining open areas where sunlight could reach the ground. Movement through the forest required caution. Dense vegetation limited visibility. Predators used this to their advantage. Large carnivorous reptiles relied on sound, vibration, and scent as much as sight. A slight disturbance in undergrowth or the sudden silence of insects could signal danger. Ambush was the most effective strategy in such environments. Hunts were brief and violent. A predator waited motionless, conserving energy until prey came within range. A sudden charge followed, lasting only seconds. If the attack failed, pursuit rarely continued far. Energy was conserved for the next opportunity. This strategy favored patience and precision over endurance. Herd behavior among herbivores reduced risk. Groups moved together, maintaining constant awareness of surroundings. Individuals communicated through low-frequency sounds and body movement. Juveniles stayed near the center, shielded by adults. When danger appeared, the forest erupted into motion as massive bodies turned and regrouped. The forest was also a place of growth and reproduction. Many reptiles chose sheltered clearings or elevated ground for nesting. Eggs were buried in warm soil or hidden among dense plants. Temperature and humidity played a role in development. Predators and scavengers constantly searched for these nests, making concealment essential. Seasonal changes influenced forest life. Wet periods brought rapid plant growth and abundant food. Dry periods increased competition, forcing animals to travel farther and increasing encounters between predators and prey. Water sources became focal points of activity, drawing animals into closer contact and raising the risk of conflict. Storms were frequent. Heavy rains flooded low areas, reshaping the forest floor. Fallen trees opened new clearings, altering light patterns and vegetation growth. These disturbances created opportunities for some species and challenges for others. Adaptability determined survival. Disease and parasites were part of daily life. Warm, humid conditions supported bacteria, and insects that spread illness, injured animals, were especially vulnerable. Scavengers benefited from deaths caused by disease, recycling nutrients back into the ecosystem. Nothing was wasted for long. The forest was not silent at night. Temperatures remained warm, allowing activity to continue. Nocturnal reptiles and early mammals emerged, feeding on insects and small animals. Predators adapted to low light, relying on hearing and smell. Night offered cover for smaller species, but brought new dangers. Interactions between species were constant. Competition for food, space, and mates shaped behavior. Some reptiles specialized in eating specific plants or prey, reducing overlap. Others adapted to changing conditions, shifting diets as needed. Flexibility increased survival chances in this crowded environment. The Jurassic forest was not simply a backdrop for giants, it was a living system that sustained them. Without dense vegetation, abundant insects, and complex ground life, large reptiles could not exist. Every fallen leaf and broken branch played a role in maintaining balance. This environment demanded constant adaptation. Those that failed disappeared quickly. Those that succeeded became part of a stable system that lasted millions of years. The forest rewarded efficiency, awareness, and resilience above all else. Life inside a Jurassic forest was intense and unforgiving. Danger was never distant, and safety was temporary. Yet, it was within these forests that reptiles refined the traits that made them dominant. Hidden beneath leaves and shadows, the foundations of reptilian rule were constantly tested and reinforced during the Jurassic. The oceans transformed into vast arenas of dominance where giant reptiles reigned without rival. As Pangaea continued to fracture, coastlines multiplied and shallow seas flooded continental margins. Warm waters spread across the planet, rich with nutrients and sunlight. This created explosive marine productivity, laying the foundation for some of the most formidable predators ever to exist. The base of the marine food web was microscopic life. Plankton flourished in sunlit waters, feeding immense populations of small fish and squid. These animals formed dense schools, converting simple energy into mobile biomass. Wherever plankton thrived, larger predators followed. This abundance allowed marine reptiles to grow to extraordinary sizes without exhausting their environment. Marine reptiles were not dinosaurs, yet they were no less dominant. Their ancestors returned to the sea long before the Jurassic, gradually reshaping their bodies for life in water. Limbs transformed into flippers. Tails became powerful propulsion tools. Lungs adapted for deep diving. Over millions of years, these reptiles perfected the art of aquatic hunting. Body shape was critical. Streamlined forms reduced drag, allowing efficient movement through water. Rigid torsos stabilized motion, while flexible tails delivered bursts of speed. Flippers were used not only for propulsion, but also for steering and rapid turns. These adaptations made marine reptiles both fast and agile, capable of chasing prey or ambushing it with sudden acceleration. Some species specialized in speed. Long, narrow jaws lined with sharp teeth were ideal for catching fish and squid. These reptiles hunted in open water using quick strikes and precise movements. Their eyes were large and forward-oriented, adapted for detecting motion even in low light. Speed allowed them to dominate vast hunting territories. Others favored brute force. Massive skulls housed powerful jaw muscles capable of crushing bone. These giants targeted large prey, including other marine reptiles. A single bite could disable or kill. Fossil evidence shows healed bite marks on skulls and ribs, proof of violent encounters between predators of similar size. Diving ability separated marine reptiles from most competitors. Many could descend hundreds of meters below the surface, and their lungs collapsed safely under pressure, reducing buoyancy and conserving oxygen. Blood chemistry allowed efficient oxygen storage, extending dive times in the deep. They hunted prey adapted to darkness, exploiting a zone where few rivals could follow. The deep ocean was a hostile environment. Light faded quickly, temperatures dropped, and pressure increased. Yet marine reptiles thrived here. Some evolved enlarged eyes to capture faint light. Others relied on vibration and movement detection. Prey had few escape options. The deep became a hunting ground where giants ruled unseen. Near coastlines, different strategies emerged. Shallow waters were crowded and dangerous. Reefs, lagoons, and estuaries supported immense biodiversity. Marine reptiles hunted among rocks and vegetation, using cover to ambush prey. Sudden lunges from below or behind were common. These environments favored precision over speed. Reproduction posed unique challenges. Marine reptiles still breathed air and laid live young rather than eggs in most cases. This adaptation freed them from land, allowing full commitment to marine life. Giving birth in water reduced vulnerability and increased offspring survival. Young were often born relatively large and capable, reducing the risk of immediate predation. Parental care varied. Some species may have offered protection during early life, while others relied on size and instinct alone. Juvenile mortality was high. Oceans were full of predators, and even young giants were vulnerable. Rapid growth was essential. Those that survived early stages quickly entered safer size ranges. Migration shaped marine reptile life. Seasonal changes in temperature and food availability drove long-distance movement. Fossil distributions suggest some species traveled thousands of kilometers. These migrations connected ecosystems, spreading genes and maintaining population stability across vast areas. The open ocean was not empty. Competition was intense. Multiple predator species often shared the same waters. Specialization reduced conflict. Differences in prey preference, hunting depth, and activity time allowed coexistence. Some hunted near the surface during daylight, others at night or in deeper zones. Storms played a significant role. Powerful waves and currents reshaped coastlines and disrupted hunting patterns. Marine reptiles were strong swimmers, but extreme weather could scatter prey and force predators to adapt quickly. Coastal species were especially affected, sometimes pushed inland or stranded temporarily. Disease and parasites existed even in the sea. Injuries from combat or failed hunts could become infected. Survival depended on resilience and healing ability. Many fossils show signs of recovery from severe trauma, including broken ribs and damaged jaws. Those that healed gained experience and dominance. The relationship between marine reptiles and their environment was reciprocal. Large predators controlled prey populations, preventing overgrazing of plankton by fish and squid. This balance maintained ocean productivity. When predators declined locally, prey populations surged, altering the ecosystem until balance was restored. Oxygen levels in Jurassic oceans supported large animals. Warm waters held less oxygen than cold ones, but circulation patterns and shallow seas ensured adequate supply. Marine reptiles compensated with efficient lungs and blood systems, allowing sustained activity even during long dives. The sensory world of marine reptiles was finely tuned. Sight dominated in clear waters, while vibration detection became critical in murkier environments. Pressure changes signaled approaching storms or large animals. These senses allowed giants to navigate complex and often dangerous waters. Territory in the ocean was fluid. Unlike land, boundaries shifted constantly. Dominance was maintained through movement and presence rather than fixed borders. Larger individuals often displaced smaller ones from productive feeding areas. Encounters between giants were displays of power, sometimes escalating into violence. Death was constant, but rarely wasted. Carcasses sank, feeding deep-sea scavengers and recycling nutrients. This downward flow of energy-supported life far below the surface. Even in death, marine reptiles shaped ocean ecosystems. Over time, marine reptiles became symbols of absolute dominance. No fish, shark, or invertebrate could match their size or power during the Jurassic. They occupied the highest trophic levels, shaping the structure of marine life across the globe. The oceans did not simply host these giants. They enabled them. Warmth, food abundance, and evolutionary opportunity combined to create a realm where reptiles became masters of depth, distance, and destruction. Land had its kings, but the sea belonged entirely to monsters. To understand Jurassic oceans is to understand how life can transform an environment into a stage for giants. Beneath the waves, far from land, reptiles reached forms and sizes never repeated. For millions of years, the oceans answered to them alone. Beneath the surface of Jurassic seas, danger did not announce itself. It rose silently from below. Death from beneath the water was the defining threat of marine life during this time, driven by predators that mastered vertical space. The ocean was not only wide and deep, it was layered, and the most effective hunters learned to move between those layers with precision. Many marine reptiles hunted from below because physics favored the attacker. Prey silhouetted against light from the surface was easier to detect. Predators hidden in darker water could rise unseen, accelerating upward with powerful tail strokes. By the time prey detected movement, escape was often impossible. This strategy reduced energy use and increased success rates. Ambush began with patience. Marine reptiles could remain nearly motionless for long periods, conserving oxygen and energy. Buoyancy control allowed them to hover at specific depths. Subtle movements of flippers corrected position without disturbing surrounding water. This stillness made them invisible in the vastness of the sea. When the attack came, it was explosive. Tails delivered sudden bursts of speed, propelling massive bodies upward. Jaws opened wide, creating pressure waves that destabilized prey. A single strike could end the hunt instantly. Even when prey survived the initial bite, injury often led to death from shock or blood loss. Prey animals adapted to this threat, but their options were limited. Schooling behavior offered some protection. Confusion made it harder for predators to target individuals. However, large marine reptiles learned to exploit this as well, attacking from below scattered schools upward, isolating individuals in moments of chaos. Vision played a central role in vertical hunting. Predators evolved eyes capable of adjusting rapidly between light and darkness. Large pupils gathered faint light from above, while retinal adaptations prevented blindness when breaking into brighter zones. This flexibility allowed precise timing during ascents. Depth was both weapon and shield. Predators often waited below the thermocline, where temperature and density changed. This boundary distorted sound and movement, masking the predator's presence. Prey crossing this invisible line became vulnerable. The ocean itself aided the hunter. Some marine reptiles specialized almost entirely in deep water ambush. They spent much of their lives far below the surface, rising only to breathe. Their bodies were built to withstand pressure. Lungs collapsed safely at depth, preventing injury. Bones were dense, reducing buoyancy and stabilizing descent. Oxygen management was critical. These reptiles stored oxygen efficiently in blood and muscle. Slow heart rates during dives conserved reserves. By minimizing movement, they extended hunting time. A single successful ambush could sustain a predator for days, reducing the need for frequent surface exposure. Coastal ambush followed similar principles, but with different terrain. Predators used underwater slopes, reefs, and drop-offs as cover. Prey animals feeding near the surface or shoreline were especially vulnerable. Attacks came from below and behind, driving prey toward obstacles or shallow water where escape routes vanished. Some marine reptiles combined ambush with pursuit. An initial strike from below injured prey, followed by a controlled chase. Even fast-swimming prey could not sustain speed for long. The predator conserved energy, maintaining distance until weakness slowed the victim. The final strike was inevitable. Vertical hunting also allowed predators to target large prey. Rising attacks destabilized massive animals by lifting and twisting their bodies. Weight worked against prey underwater. Once balance was lost, recovery was slow. Predators used gravity and water resistance as tools. Fossil evidence supports these strategies. Bite marks on the undersides of bones suggest attacks from below. Healed injuries indicate survivors of ambush attempts, while fatal wounds show crushing force delivered upward. Skeletal damage patterns reveal where and how predators struck. Ambush hunting reduced risk for predators. Frontal attacks carried danger from teeth, tails, and defensive movement. Attacks from below limited counterstrikes. Prey could not easily see or maneuver against a rising threat. This increased predator survival and reinforced the strategy through natural selection. Prey species evolved responses, but none eliminated the threat. Some stayed closer to the surface, reducing vertical distance. Others avoided certain depths or areas altogether. However, food availability often forced them into dangerous zones. Hunger outweighed caution. Night intensified ambush success. Darkness erased visual warnings. Predators with enhanced low-light vision gained further advantage. Prey relied on movement detection, but stillness before attack reduced detectable signals. Many hunts likely occurred at dawn, dusk, or night when contrast was greatest. The vertical dimension also shaped migration. Prey species avoided known ambush zones during certain seasons, altering routes. Predators followed, adjusting depth and timing. This dynamic chase influenced marine ecosystems across entire basins. Competition among predators existed even in ambush hunting. Larger individuals controlled the most productive depth layers. Smaller predators were forced into less optimal zones or different prey types. Dominance was enforced through size and occasional violent encounters. Injuries were common. Failed ambushes sometimes resulted in counterattacks. Broken teeth and damaged jaws appear in fossils, showing that prey could fight back. Healing ability was essential. Predators that survived early injuries became more cautious and effective hunters. Juvenile predators learned through experience. Early hunts targeted smaller prey in shallower water. As size and skill increased, they descended deeper and targeted larger animals. This gradual progression reduced mortality and ensured skill transfer across generations. Ambush hunting influenced body design. Streamlined forms reduced water resistance during ascent. Powerful tail muscles provided acceleration. Jaws opened wide to compensate for timing errors. These traits became defining features of dominant marine reptiles. The ocean itself changed under this pressure. Prey distribution shifted vertically. Some species adapted to live permanently deeper, others stayed near the surface. This layering increased biodiversity while reinforcing predator dominance. Death from below was constant and unseen. Prey lived under permanent threat, shaping behavior and evolution. Vigilance became a survival trait. Hesitation meant death. For millions of years, this strategy ruled Jurassic seas. Predators did not need speed over distance or complex coordination. Patience, depth, and timing were enough. The ocean rewarded those who mastered vertical space. To live in Jurassic waters was to accept that danger came from beneath. Survival depended on awareness and luck. Dominance belonged to those who rose from darkness with perfect timing. The sea was not a place of open pursuit. It was a realm of sudden violence. Unseen until the final moment, marine reptiles turned depth into a weapon. And through that mastery, they ruled the oceans completely. During the Jurassic, the sky ceased to be an empty frontier. Flying reptiles transformed the air into a contested space, extending reptilian dominance beyond land and sea. Once gravity was overcome, distance lost meaning. Cliffs, coastlines, forests, and open water became connected by wings, and survival took on a new vertical dimension. The rise of flight was driven by opportunity. Warm air currents, open landscapes, and abundant prey created ideal conditions. Insects filled the skies. Fish swam close to the surface. Small reptiles and early mammals moved below. For creatures capable of flight, food existed everywhere, and escape routes multiplied instantly. Flying reptiles evolved bodies unlike anything on land. Their bones were light yet strong, reinforced internally to withstand stress. Wings were formed from stretched skin membranes, supported by elongated fingers, anchored to the body and hind limbs. This design maximized surface area while minimizing weight, allowing lift with minimal energy. Takeoff was one of the most critical challenges. Large flying reptiles could not simply leap into the air like birds. Instead, they relied on powerful forelimbs and hind limbs working together. A rapid vault launched the body upward, converting muscular force into lift. Once airborne, wings spread fully, and the animal transitioned into gliding or flapping flight. Flight efficiency mattered more than constant flapping. Warm Jurassic air produced strong thermal currents, especially near coastlines and forests. Flying reptiles learned to ride these invisible columns of rising air, circling upward with little effort. This allowed long-distance travel without exhaustion and made the sky an energy-efficient hunting ground. From above, vision dominated, elevated, perspective revealed, movement across vast areas, fish breaking the surface, herds moving through clearings, and insects swarming over vegetation were all visible. This advantage turned flight into a surveillance system, reducing search time and increasing hunting success. Hunting strategies varied. Some flying reptiles skimmed the surface of the ocean, snapping fish from the water with elongated jaws. Timing was precise. A misjudged strike risked collision with waves. Others descended onto land, targeting small animals or scavenging carcasses before ground predators arrived. Ambush was possible even from the air. Descending attacks used gravity to increase speed. Prey had little warning. A sudden shadow or rush of wind was often the only signal before impact. This method reduced resistance and allowed capture of agile prey. Feeding anatomy reflected specialization. Narrow jaws, lined with needle-like teeth, were ideal for grasping slippery fish. Broader jaws handled harder prey or scavenged flesh. Necks were flexible, allowing quick adjustments during flight or landing. Flight also reshaped reproduction and territory. Flying reptiles could reach isolated nesting sites inaccessible to land predators. Cliffs, rocky outcrops, and remote coastlines provided protection. These locations reduced egg predation and increased reproductive success. Eggs were vulnerable, but nesting behavior compensated. Many flying reptiles likely nested in colonies, overwhelming predators through numbers. Adults could defend nests from the air, diving aggressively at intruders. Flight turned defense into an active strategy rather than passive reliance on concealment. Juveniles faced extreme danger. Flight ability developed gradually. Early life stages relied on climbing and gliding before mastering powered flight. Mortality was high. Those that survived gained access to the safest and most resource-rich environments on the planet. The sky also offered escape. Ground predators posed little threat to flying reptiles once airborne. Even marine predators struggled to attack creatures capable of lifting off instantly. This reduced adult mortality and allowed longer lifespans. Competition in the air existed but was less intense than on land or sea. Open space reduced conflict. Specialization further minimized overlap. Some species dominated coastal airspace, others inland forests, and some followed rivers and lakes. Altitude itself became a niche, with different species occupying different flight levels. Weather influenced aerial life. Storms were dangerous, but flying reptiles adapted. Strong wings allowed controlled gliding in turbulent air. Instinct guided avoidance of extreme conditions. However, sudden storms could cause mass deaths, especially among juveniles. Night flight was limited but possible. Low light reduced hunting efficiency, but moonlight and starlight provided enough illumination for navigation. Nocturnal insects offered food. Predators adapted their schedules, avoiding competition by hunting at different times. Interaction with land ecosystems was constant. Flying reptiles transported nutrients between environments. Waste fell from above, fertilizing soil and water. Carcasses dropped into the sea, fed scavengers. Flight linked ecosystems in ways ground animals could not. Size varied dramatically. Some flying reptiles were small and agile, feeding on insects. Others reached immense wingspans, dwarfing modern birds. Size influenced strategy. Smaller species relied on rapid flapping and maneuverability. Larger ones depended on soaring and precision landings. Landing itself was risky. Large flying reptiles needed space and stability. Cliffs and open beaches were preferred. Forest landings required skill to avoid entanglement. Broken bones from failed landings were likely fatal. Fossil evidence shows wear patterns consistent with frequent flight. Muscle attachment sites indicate powerful forelimbs. Joint structures reveal a balance between flexibility and strength. These were not experimental flyers. They were fully adapted aerial animals. The presence of flying reptiles changed predator behavior below. Ground animals became alert to shadows and movement above. Camouflage evolved not just for horizontal threats, but vertical ones. The sky added a new axis of danger. Flight also influenced evolution indirectly. By accessing new food sources, flying reptiles reduced pressure on land ecosystems. This allowed greater stability and diversity below. Predators, prey, and plants all adjusted to this expanded ecological web. Despite their dominance, flying reptiles were not invincible. Environmental changes threatened them. Shifts in climate-altered wind patterns and thermal availability. Changes in sea level affected coastal nesting sites. Competition increased as early birds began to emerge later in time. During the Jurassic, however, the sky was theirs. No birds yet rivaled their size or reach. Insects were abundant. Coastlines were wide and productive. The conditions favored wings, supported by membranes and bones shaped by evolution. The sky no longer belonged to chance. It became territory. Flying reptiles turned air into habitat, movement into advantage, and height into safety. Land and sea had kings, but the sky gained its own rulers. Jurassic Earth was no longer two-dimensional. With flight, life expanded upward. Danger, opportunity, and dominance followed. And from above, reptiles watched the world below, unseen and untouchable. Masters of a realm no creature had ruled before. The Jurassic world functioned through tightly balanced food chains that connected land, sea and sky into a single living system. Energy flowed from plants to herbivores, from herbivores to predators, and finally to scavengers and decomposers. Nothing existed in isolation. Every organism depended on others, and even the largest reptiles were bound by these invisible links. At the base of nearly every food chain were plants. Jurassic vegetation was abundant and highly productive. Warm temperatures, high carbon dioxide levels, and widespread rainfall allowed forests and coastal plants to grow rapidly. Conifers, cycads, ferns, and ginkgos converted sunlight into biomass at enormous scales. This plant matter was the foundation that supported all large animals. Herbivorous reptiles were the primary converters of plant energy into animal mass. They fed constantly, consuming vast quantities of vegetation each day. Digestion was slow but efficient. Large gut systems broke down tough plant fibers, extracting enough nutrients to support massive bodies. Without these herbivores, energy would remain locked in plant tissue, unavailable to higher levels of the food chain. Different herbivores fed at different heights and locations. Some browsed high in trees, stripping leaves and branches. Others fed on low-growing plants, ferns, and shrubs. This separation reduced competition and allowed more species to coexist. It also ensured that plant growth was controlled at multiple levels, preventing any single type from dominating. Herbivores did not simply consume plants. They shaped landscapes. Constant feeding opened forests, created grass-like clearings, and influenced which plants survived. Seeds were spread through waste, helping vegetation expand into new areas. The movement of large herds redistributed nutrients across wide regions, fertilizing soil and maintaining productivity. Predators depended entirely on herbivores for energy. Plant matter could not sustain them directly. Carnivorous reptiles evolved to extract maximum energy from flesh and bone. Hunting was risky and costly, so predators evolved strategies that minimized effort and increased success. Ambush, cooperative behavior, and targeting vulnerable individuals were all ways to conserve energy. Apex predators sat at the top of food chains. They hunted large prey and had few natural enemies once fully grown. However, they were not invincible. Injury, disease, and starvation could still end their lives. Their populations were always limited by the availability of prey. Too many predators would collapse the system by overhunting, so natural selection favored balance rather than excess. Secondary predators occupied the middle levels. They hunted smaller animals, juveniles, or scavenged from larger kills. This reduced waste and ensured that energy was used efficiently. A single carcass could support dozens of species, from large scavengers to insects and microbes. Scavengers played a crucial role. They consumed remains left behind by predators or animals that died from other causes. This prevented the buildup of rotting matter and reduced disease. Scavenging reptiles and small carnivores extracted remaining nutrients, passing energy further down the chain. Decomposers completed the cycle. Bacteria, fungi, and insects broke down waste and dead tissue into basic nutrients. These nutrients returned to the soil and water, feeding plants once again. Without decomposers, food chains would collapse under their own waste. On land, these processes created layered food webs rather than simple chains. A single herbivore might feed multiple predator species. One predator might hunt several types of prey. This redundancy increased stability. If one species declined, others could fill its role, preventing total collapse. Marine food chains followed similar principles but operated in 3 dimensions. Plankton formed the base, feeding small fish and invertebrates. These supported larger fish and squid, which in turn fed marine reptiles. Vertical movement added complexity. Energy flowed not only across species, but across depth. Marine reptiles occupied multiple levels, depending on size and specialization. Smaller species fed on fish and squid. Larger ones hunted other marine reptiles. Scavengers consumed carcasses that sank to the sea floor. Deep-sea ecosystems depended heavily on this falling energy, known as marine snow. The sky added another layer. Flying reptiles fed on fish, insects, and small land animals. They transferred energy between environments. A fish caught at sea might be digested and its waste deposited inland, fertilizing forests. This movement linked ecosystems that would otherwise remain separate. Juveniles occupied different positions in food chains than adults. Young giant reptiles often fed on smaller prey, gradually shifting diet as they grew. This reduced competition with adults and allowed populations to sustain themselves without exhausting resources. Seasonal changes affected food chains. During wet periods, plant growth increased, supporting larger herbivore populations. Predator numbers followed with a delay. During dry periods, food scarcity increased competition. Weaker individuals died, stabilizing populations before collapse. Migration played a key role in balancing food chains. Herbivores moved to follow vegetation growth. Predators followed herbivores. This movement prevented localized overgrazing and allowed ecosystems time to recover. Migration connected distant regions into a single functional system. Competition shaped behavior. Predators avoided direct conflict when possible because injury reduced hunting ability. Instead, dominance, hierarchies, and territory reduced constant fighting. Herbivores used herd behavior and vigilance to reduce losses. These behaviors conserved energy across the system. Food chains were not fixed. They shifted with environmental change. Volcanic activity, sea level fluctuations, and climate shifts altered plant distribution and prey availability. Species that adapted quickly survived. Those that could not disappeared, opening space for others. Mass death events occurred even outside major extinctions. Storms, droughts, and disease could kill large numbers of animals. These events temporarily flooded food chains with energy. Scavengers and decomposers expanded rapidly, recycling nutrients back into the system. The presence of giants amplified these effects. When a massive herbivore died, it represented years of stored plant energy. Its carcass could feed entire communities for weeks. Such events were rare but transformative, supporting bursts of life across multiple levels. Balance was maintained through limitation. No species could grow unchecked. Food availability, disease, predation, and environmental change enforced boundaries. This balance allowed Jurassic ecosystems to persist for millions of years without collapse. The food chains of the Jurassic were not fragile. They were resilient networks, built on abundance and efficiency. Energy flowed continuously, rarely wasted. Each species played a role, from microscopic organisms to the largest reptiles ever to walk or swim. Understanding these food chains reveals why giant reptiles could exist at all. Size required stability. Stability required balance. And balance was achieved through interconnected systems that linked every living thing. The Jurassic world did not function through chaos or constant struggle alone. It functioned through structure. Predators, prey, and plants were bound together by energy flow, each shaping the other. Giants ruled, but only because the system beneath them could support their weight. In this world, survival was not about domination alone. It was about fitting into the chain without breaking it. Those that did endured. Those that did not vanished, leaving their energy to fuel the next generation. This was the invisible engine of Jurassic dominance. Beneath every hunt and every migration lay a network of connections that kept the world alive. And as long as that network held, giant reptiles would continue to rule. Survival in the Jurassic demanded more than size alone. The world was crowded with danger, competition, and environmental stress. To persist, reptiles evolved extreme adaptations that pushed anatomy and behavior to their limits. Armor, speed, weapons, senses, and physiology were refined over millions of years, producing animals perfectly tuned to their roles. Defensive adaptations were essential for herbivores living among powerful predators. Thick skin acted as the first barrier. In many large reptiles, skin was reinforced with dense connective tissue that resisted tearing and biting. Beneath this, layers of muscle absorbed impact and reduced injury. Even when bitten, deep wounds were difficult to inflict. Some reptiles went further, evolving natural armor. Bony plates embedded in the skin formed protective shields across backs, flanks, or tails. These structures distributed force across a wider area, preventing fatal damage. Armor was heavy, but in a warm climate with abundant food, the cost was manageable. Survival benefits outweighed the burden. Tails became weapons. Massive herbivores evolved muscular tails, capable of delivering crushing blows, swung with momentum. A tail could break bones or knock a predator off balance. This turned defense into offense. Predators approaching from behind faced serious risk, forcing them to attack with greater caution. Speed was another form of defense. Not all reptiles grew enormous. Medium-sized species relied on agility and acceleration. Powerful hind limbs allowed rapid bursts of movement, enough to escape ambushes or reach cover. Speed reduced the need for heavy armor, allowing lighter builds and faster growth. Predators adapted in response. Jaws became specialized tools. Teeth varied widely in shape and function. Some were blade-like, serrated for slicing flesh. Others were thick and conical, designed to crush bone. Tooth replacement was continuous. Damaged teeth were quickly replaced, maintaining killing efficiency throughout life. Bite force increased through skull design. Reinforced bones and enlarged muscle attachment sites allowed stronger jaw closure. Some predators evolved skulls, capable of withstanding immense stress, enabling them to hold struggling prey or tear through thick hide. Skull shape reflected hunting style, balancing strength with weight. Neck strength mattered as much as jaws. Powerful neck muscles allowed predators to shake prey violently, widening wounds and causing rapid blood loss. This reduced the need for prolonged struggle, minimizing injury risk. Once prey was immobilized, feeding could begin safely. Senses were refined to detect danger and opportunity. Vision improved in many species. Forward-facing eyes provided depth perception, while wide-field vision detected movement across open areas. Some reptiles evolved enhanced low-light vision, allowing activity at dawn, dusk, or night when competition was reduced. Hearing likely played a larger role than often assumed. Low-frequency sounds traveled far through dense forests and across open plains. Detecting these vibrations provided early warning of approaching predators or rival herds. Sensitivity to ground vibrations may have alerted animals to large moving bodies before they were visible. Smell was critical for tracking and avoidance. Predators used scent to locate prey, follow blood trails, or detect carrion from great distances. Herbivores used smell to recognize predators or find suitable feeding grounds. Chemical cues carried information long after an animal passed through an area. Camouflage was widespread among smaller reptiles. Skin patterns broke up outlines, blending bodies into vegetation or rocky terrain. Stillness enhanced this effect. Predators often passed within meters without noticing hidden prey. Camouflage reduced detection rather than preventing attack, buying time for escape. Some reptiles evolved spines, crests, or horns. These structures served multiple purposes, and visually they made animals appear larger and more threatening. Physically, they protected vulnerable areas or inflicted damage during combat. Socially, they may have played roles in display and recognition, reducing unnecessary fighting. Behavioral adaptations were as important as physical ones. Herd behavior reduced individual risk. Many eyes detected danger sooner. Coordinated movement confused predators and protected juveniles. Social structure increased survival even when individuals were not physically formidable. Predators adapted socially as well. Some hunted cooperatively, using numbers to overwhelm larger prey. Others specialized as solitary hunters, relying on stealth and ambush. Flexibility allowed predators to exploit different opportunities depending on environment and prey availability. Metabolism shaped adaptation limits. Reptiles required less energy than mammals, allowing larger size and longer fasting periods. This made them resilient during food shortages. Predators could survive weeks without eating, waiting for the right opportunity rather than taking unnecessary risks. Growth rates were adaptive. Rapid early growth reduced vulnerability. Juveniles that grew quickly passed through dangerous size ranges faster. Those that survived early years gained significant advantage. Growth slowed with age, redirecting energy to reproduction and maintenance. Reproductive strategies balanced risk and output. Many reptiles laid large numbers of eggs, accepting high juvenile mortality. Others invested more in fewer offspring, increasing individual survival chances. These strategies reflected environmental pressure and predator density. Temperature regulation influenced behavior. Basking increased body temperature and activity. Shade reduced overheating. Large body size provided thermal stability, allowing consistent activity across the day. Smaller species relied on timing, becoming active during optimal temperature windows. Water use also mattered. Many reptiles stayed close to rivers, lakes, or coasts. Water regulated temperature, supported food sources, and provided escape routes. Some species used partial submersion to reduce body weight or hide from predators. Disease resistance was an unseen adaptation. Immune systems capable of fighting infection increased survival after injury. Fossils showing healed wounds suggest strong healing ability. Animals that recovered from severe trauma gained experience, making them more effective survivors. Competition drove specialization. When resources overlapped, species adapted to reduce conflict. Changes in diet, habitat use, or activity timing allowed coexistence. This specialization increased overall ecosystem diversity and stability. Extreme adaptations came with trade-offs. Heavy armor reduced speed, massive size increased juvenile vulnerability, specialized diets increased risk during environmental change. Evolution balanced these costs against survival benefits in a relatively stable Jurassic world. Environmental stress-tested adaptations constantly. Droughts favored water-efficient species. Storms tested structural strength. Volcanic activity altered habitats suddenly. Only flexible, resilient adaptations endured over time. Some traits were inherited by later reptiles and even modern species. Armor plates, efficient lungs, egg-laying strategies, and metabolic efficiency trace their roots to Jurassic experiments. These adaptations proved effective beyond the age of giants. Survival was never guaranteed. Even the best adapted individuals could fall to chance. A mistimed hunt, an injury, or sudden environmental change could end dominance instantly. Evolution favored populations, not individuals. The Jurassic world was a proving ground. Extreme adaptations were tested relentlessly. Those that worked spread across continents. Those that failed vanished, leaving fossils as evidence of experimentation. Giant reptiles did not rule through brute force alone. They ruled through refinement. Every scale, tooth, muscle, and behavior was shaped by pressure over immense time. Survival demanded excellence, and the Jurassic rewarded those who achieved it. This constant pressure forged a world where reptiles reached extremes, rarely repeated. Armor thickened, speed increased, weapons sharpened, senses expanded. Evolution pushed life toward its limits, and for millions of years, reptiles answered with dominance. These adaptations were not accidents. They were solutions. Solutions to predation, competition, climate, and scarcity. Together, they defined the Jurassic as an age where survival required becoming extraordinary. Reproduction was the most vulnerable phase of life in the Jurassic, even for the largest reptiles. Survival of a species depended not on the strength of adults, but on the ability of eggs and juveniles to endure a world filled with predators, environmental hazards, and constant competition. Every successful generation was the result of countless failures. Giant reptiles reproduced through strategies shaped by risk. Most laid eggs, relying on numbers rather than protection. Eggs represented stored energy, vulnerable and defenseless once laid. Predators recognized this. Nests were prime targets, and few remained undiscovered for long unless carefully hidden. Nesting sites were chosen with precision. Location mattered more than size or strength. Warm soil accelerated development, reducing exposure time. Elevated ground prevented flooding. Dense vegetation offered concealment. Some species selected sandy coastal areas, while others preferred forest clearings or riverbanks. Temperature-controlled development. Eggs incubated by environmental heat rather than parental care in many cases. Slight changes in temperature affected growth, speed, and survival rates. Too cold slowed development, increasing predation risk. Too hot caused deformities or death. Successful nesting required precise environmental conditions. Some reptiles buried eggs deep to protect them from scavengers and temperature extremes. Others laid eggs in shallow nests, relying on camouflage and isolation. A few species may have guarded nests temporarily, deterring predators through presence rather than direct care. Colonial nesting increased survival odds. Many individuals laying eggs in the same area overwhelmed predators through sheer numbers. While many nests were destroyed, enough survived to sustain populations. Predators could not consume everything. This strategy sacrificed individuals to preserve the species. Eggshells evolved for protection. Thickness balanced strength with gas exchange. Pores allowed oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. Shell structure resisted crushing while permitting embryonic development. These adaptations increased hatching success under constant threat. Hatching was a critical moment. Young reptiles emerged, small, weak, and exposed. The act of breaking free consumed energy and time. Predators often targeted this stage. Many hatchlings never left the nest. Survival depended on timing and luck. Those that survived faced immediate danger. Juveniles occupied different ecological roles than adults. They fed on smaller prey, insects or plants, avoiding direct competition. Rapid growth was essential. Every increase in size reduced vulnerability. Growth rates were highest during early life. Warm climates and abundant food allowed continuous feeding. Bones lengthened quickly. Muscles developed rapidly. Juveniles that grew faster passed through dangerous size ranges sooner, increasing survival odds. Behavior compensated for physical weakness. Juveniles relied on concealment, stillness, and speed. Many remained hidden for long periods, feeding at dawn or dusk. Others stayed near cover or water. These behaviors reduced encounters with predators. Some species displayed forms of parental association. Adults may have remained near nesting areas or migration routes, providing indirect protection. Even minimal deterrence increased juvenile survival. However, extended parental care was costly and limited by adult survival needs. Herd-based species offered greater juvenile protection. Adults formed moving barriers, keeping young in central positions. Alarm responses spread quickly through groups. Coordinated movement reduced isolation, the primary cause of juvenile death. Marine reptiles faced different challenges. Many gave birth to live young in water. This eliminated egg predation entirely. Offspring were born relatively developed, capable of swimming immediately. This adaptation greatly increased survival in open water. However, marine juveniles still faced intense predation. Oceans were crowded with hunters, and size was the only reliable defense. Rapid growth remained critical. Those that survived early months quickly became less vulnerable. Flying reptiles faced unique reproductive challenges. Eggs were laid in protected locations such as cliffs or remote coastlines. Nesting sites were often inaccessible to land predators. However, eggs remained exposed to weather and aerial threats. Colonial nesting was common among flying reptiles. Large groups reduced individual risk. Adults defended nesting sites aggressively, using flight to dive at intruders. This active defense increased hatchling survival compared to passive strategies. Juvenile flying reptiles developed flight gradually. Early stages involved climbing and gliding before powered flight. During this time, vulnerability was extreme. Many died before achieving full flight capability. Those that succeeded gained access to safety unreachable to others. Mortality rates across all reptiles were high. Only a small fraction of offspring reached adulthood. This was expected and built into reproductive strategies. Producing many offspring ensured continuity despite losses. Reproductive timing mattered. Laying eggs during periods of high food availability increased juvenile survival. Synchronizing hatching reduced predator efficiency. Predators could not consume all hatchlings at once. Timing overwhelmed threats. Environmental disasters tested reproductive success. Floods destroyed nests. Droughts reduced food for juveniles. Volcanic activity altered landscapes. Suddenly, species that spread nesting across multiple sites reduced total loss risk. Genetic variation ensured adaptability. Not all offspring were identical. Some tolerated temperature extremes better. Others grew faster or avoided predators more effectively. These differences determined which traits passed to the next generation. Sexual maturity was reached slowly in giants. Years passed before individuals reproduced. This increased risk, as death before maturity meant total reproductive failure. However, those that survived long enough often reproduced multiple times, balancing risk. Longevity supported reproductive success. Large reptiles that reached adulthood could reproduce over decades. Repeated nesting increased chances of producing surviving offspring. This favored traits that enhanced adult survival even at the cost of slower growth. Competition influenced reproduction. Dominant individuals often gained better nesting sites or mating opportunities. Physical strength and experience increased reproductive success. This reinforced successful traits across generations. Migration affected reproductive strategies. Some species returned to specific nesting areas repeatedly. Familiarity with terrain increased success. However, reliance on specific sites increased vulnerability to environmental change. Disease impacted reproduction as well. Infected adults produced weaker offspring or failed to reproduce. Disease outbreaks reduced population size rapidly. Recovery depended on surviving healthy individuals and favorable conditions. Fossil evidence reveals nesting behavior through preserved eggs, embryos, and nesting sites. These discoveries show repeated use of specific locations and reveal developmental stages. They confirm that reproduction was a major evolutionary pressure. Reproductive failure was common but not catastrophic. Ecosystems compensated through abundance and time. Species persisted through resilience rather than perfection. The Jurassic world demanded sacrifice. Many lives were lost before maturity, but those losses fueled adaptation. Each generation refined strategies, improving survival odds incrementally. Reproduction was not about protecting every offspring. It was about ensuring enough survived. This harsh logic shaped life during the Jurassic and allowed giant reptiles to dominate for millions of years. Without effective reproduction, size and power meant nothing. Dominance ended in extinction. Survival of species depended on fragile eggs, vulnerable young, and precise timing. The success of Jurassic reptiles was built on this foundation. Beneath every giant was a lineage that survived impossible odds. Nests hidden, eggs warmed, young protected just long enough. Through reproduction, the giants endured. Through reproduction, their world continued. And through countless unseen struggles at the smallest scale, the age of giant reptiles remained unbroken for millions of years. The Jurassic world was not a paradise of endless stability. Beneath its long periods of balance lay constant geological and climatic violence. Climate disasters and mass deaths were recurring forces that reshaped ecosystems again and again. These events did not end reptilian dominance, but they tested it, removing the unfit and reinforcing resilience. Volcanic activity was one of the most powerful drivers of disruption. As Pangaea fractured, magma rose through thinning crust. Massive volcanic provinces released lava across enormous areas, burying forests and river systems under layers of rock. Entire habitats vanished in weeks. Animals caught in these zones had no escape. Volcanoes affected more than land. Ash filled the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and cooling regions temporarily. Acid rain damaged vegetation and contaminated water sources. Herbivores starved as plants died back. Predators followed, only to face the same scarcity. Food chains collapsed locally, leading to widespread death. Yet, volcanic eruptions also created new environments. Once lava cooled and weathered, mineral-rich soils supported rapid plant growth, ecosystems rebounded. Species that survived nearby recolonized these areas, often thriving in the absence of competitors. Destruction and renewal were tightly linked. Sea level change was another major force. During the Jurassic, sea levels rose and fell repeatedly. Warm climates caused thermal expansion of oceans, flooding coastal plains and lowlands. Vast areas disappeared beneath shallow seas, drowning forests and displacing land animals. These marine transgressions killed many terrestrial species, but created new marine habitats. Shallow seas were highly productive, supporting marine reptiles and fish in enormous numbers. As land shrank, the sea expanded its influence, shifting the balance of life. When sea levels fell again, land re-emerged, altered and unstable. New river systems formed. Sediments reshaped landscapes. Animals returning to these areas faced unfamiliar conditions. Some adapted quickly. Others failed, leaving space for new species to arise. Storms were frequent and severe. Warm oceans fueled powerful weather systems. Prolonged rainfall caused massive flooding, drowning low-lying habitats and washing away nests. Juveniles were especially vulnerable. Entire breeding seasons could be lost in a single event. Floods reshaped ecosystems physically. Rivers changed course. Forests were flattened. Soil layers shifted. These changes forced migration and altered food availability. Species dependent on specific habitats suffered most. Droughts followed floods. Climate variability created alternating extremes. Dry periods reduced water sources and vegetation. Animals congregated around remaining water, increasing competition and disease transmission. Weakened individuals died quickly. Drought-driven mass deaths were common. Fossil assemblages often show multiple individuals of different species dying together near ancient water sources. These events removed large portions of populations but rarely caused total collapse. Survivors carried traits suited for scarcity. Wildfires likely occurred as well. Dry vegetation ignited easily, especially near volcanic regions. Fires spread rapidly through forests, killing slow-moving animals and destroying cover. Smaller, faster species often survived by escaping or hiding underground. Fire altered plant communities. Fast-growing species dominated post-fire landscapes. Herbivores adapted to new diets. Those unable to adjust declined. Fire acted as a selective force, favoring flexibility over specialization. Disease outbreaks followed disasters. Weakened animals were more susceptible to infection. Crowded conditions near limited resources accelerated spread. Parasites thrived in warm, wet conditions after floods. Disease could reduce populations dramatically within short periods. Mass deaths were not rare anomalies. They were part of the Jurassic rhythm. Ecosystems were built to absorb loss. High reproductive rates and long lifespans allowed recovery over time. Extinction occurred when pressures exceeded adaptive capacity. Marine environments face their own disasters. Changes in ocean circulation altered oxygen levels. Warm, stagnant waters could become low in oxygen, killing fish and invertebrates. Marine reptiles dependent on these prey suffered indirectly. Dead zones formed temporarily in shallow seas. Carcasses accumulated, feeding scavengers but signaling ecosystem stress. When circulation improved, life returned, often with different species dominating. Meteor impacts, while less frequent, were possible. Even moderate impacts caused regional devastation. Shockwaves, fires, and tsunamis killed indiscriminately. Dust clouds altered climate temporarily. Such events reshaped ecosystems suddenly and violently. Evidence of mass mortality appears in fossil beds containing large numbers of individuals preserved together. These sites reflect sudden death, not gradual accumulation. They reveal moments when environment overpowered adaptation. Behavior influenced survival during disasters. Migratory species could escape localized events. Sedentary species were trapped. Animals with broader diets adapted better to sudden food loss. Specialization increased risk. Size was not always an advantage. Massive reptiles required vast resources. During scarcity, smaller species often survived more easily. This temporarily shifted ecosystem balance until conditions improved. Juveniles were most affected. Disasters removed entire cohorts. Recovery depended on surviving adults reproducing successfully afterward. This delayed population rebound, but rarely prevented it entirely. Some disasters favored certain adaptations. Droughts favored water-efficient species. Floods favored swimmers and semi-aquatic reptiles. Volcanic regions favored animals, tolerant of ash and altered vegetation. Each event reshaped selection pressures. Over time, repeated disasters refined ecosystems, fragile relationships disappeared, and resilient systems remained. This pruning process strengthened long-term stability even as it caused short-term devastation. Disasters also influenced evolution indirectly by isolating populations. Surviving groups in separated refuges diverged genetically. When environments stabilized, these differences produced new species. Destruction became a driver of diversity. Climate disasters did not end the age of giant reptiles, but they prevented stagnation. Constant pressure ensured that only adaptable forms persisted. Dominance required resilience as much as strength. The Jurassic was not a calm world. It was dynamic and often brutal. Stability existed, but it was temporary. Life survived by anticipating disruption rather than resisting it. Mass deaths were part of the cost of dominance. They cleared space, redistributed resources, and tested adaptation. Species that endured these trials became the long-term rulers of the planet. The Jurassic was not ruled by reptiles alone. Early dinosaurs shared the planet with many other giant reptiles, and their coexistence shaped one of the most competitive evolutionary landscapes in Earth's history. This was not a simple story of replacement or dominance. It was a long period of overlap, competition, and ecological partitioning, where different groups carved out distinct roles. Early dinosaurs emerged before the Jurassic fully began, but during this period they diversified rapidly, and they were not yet the uncontested rulers of land. Instead, they existed alongside large crocodile-like reptiles, massive herbivores unrelated to dinosaurs, and a wide range of predators that competed for the same resources. Competition was unavoidable. Land offered limited space, food, and nesting sites. When multiple large animals relied on similar resources, natural selection favored separation rather than constant conflict. This separation took many forms, including differences in diet, habitat preference, activity timing, and body design. Many non-dinosaur reptiles dominated semi-aquatic environments. Rivers, lakes, and coastal lowlands were often ruled by crocodile-line reptiles adapted for both land and water. These animals hunted at water edges, ambushing prey that came to drink or cross. Early dinosaurs generally avoided these zones, reducing direct competition. On open floodplains and forests, dinosaurs and giant reptiles overlapped more directly. Herbivorous dinosaurs fed on similar vegetation as other large plant eaters. However, differences in feeding height and movement reduced conflict. Some dinosaurs evolved upright postures and efficient walking styles that allowed long-distance migration. Other reptiles relied on bulk and local abundance. Dinosaurs benefited from limb posture. Legs positioned directly under the body supported efficient movement and endurance. This allowed them to travel farther between feeding grounds. In contrast, some giant reptiles were more limited in range, thriving best where food was constantly available. Predatory competition followed similar patterns. Dinosaur predators were often faster and more agile, relying on pursuit or coordinated attacks. Non-dinosaur predators tended to favor ambush and raw strength. These different strategies allowed coexistence even when prey overlapped. Timing also mattered. Some predators were active at different times of day. Dawn, dusk, and night offered opportunities to avoid direct competition. Temperature influenced activity patterns, with some reptiles becoming less active during cooler periods. Body size influenced outcomes. In regions where non-dinosaur reptiles reached extreme sizes, they often remained dominant predators. Dinosaurs in these areas were smaller or more specialized. Where dinosaur predators grew larger and faster, other reptiles declined or shifted roles. Reproductive strategies affected competition as well. Dinosaurs may have matured faster in some cases, allowing quicker population recovery after losses. This gave them an advantage in unstable environments. Slower-growing reptiles relied on longevity and repeated reproduction over time. Climate change gradually shifted this balance. As the Jurassic progressed, environmental conditions favored traits common among dinosaurs. Efficient movement, upright posture, and flexible diets became increasingly advantageous. However, this shift was slow and uneven across regions. There was no single moment when dinosaurs replaced other reptiles. Instead, dominance varied by location and time. In some ecosystems, dinosaurs were primary herbivores. In others, non-dinosaur reptiles remained key players for millions of years. Marine and aerial realms remained largely outside dinosaur influence. Marine reptiles continued to dominate oceans without serious competition from dinosaurs. Flying reptiles ruled the skies, with early birds appearing only later and in limited roles. This separation reduced overall competition. Dinosaurs focused on terrestrial niches, while other reptiles controlled water and air. This division allowed reptilian dominance to persist as a whole, even as internal competition continued. Fossil evidence shows overlap rather than replacement. Trackways reveal dinosaurs and other reptiles using the same landscapes at different times. Bite marks and nesting sites indicate coexistence rather than exclusion. Evolution favored flexibility. Species that could shift diet, habitat, or behavior survived longer. Those locked into narrow roles disappeared when conditions changed. Dinosaurs gradually demonstrated greater adaptability in many regions. Over time, this adaptability gave dinosaurs an edge. As climates fluctuated and continents continued to separate, dinosaurs expanded into niches previously held by other reptiles. And this expansion was not violent conquest, but ecological opportunity. Some giant reptiles declined due to environmental change rather than direct competition. Shrinking wetlands, reduced habitats for semi-aquatic species, changing vegetation favored different feeding strategies. Dinosaurs adapted more readily to these shifts. The relationship between dinosaurs and other reptiles was dynamic. In some cases, dinosaurs benefited from the presence of large reptiles that controlled prey populations or modified landscapes. Ecosystems were interconnected, not zero-sum. Juveniles of different groups often occupied similar niches. Competition at early life stages was intense. Survival depended on growth, speed, and concealment. Those that grew faster escaped danger sooner. Disease and disaster affected all groups equally. Volcanic events, floods, and droughts did not favor dinosaurs specifically. Survival depended on location and timing. However, dinosaurs often rebounded faster after such events. This gradual advantage accumulated. Over millions of years, dinosaurs became more common in many terrestrial ecosystems. Other reptiles retreated to specialized roles or disappeared entirely from land dominance. Yet during much of the Jurassic, the world remained shared. Giant reptiles still roamed alongside dinosaurs. Dominance was regional, not global. Diversity remained high. This coexistence shaped evolution profoundly. Competition drove innovation. Adaptations improved. Both dinosaurs and other reptiles became more specialized and efficient. The Jurassic was therefore not simply the age of dinosaurs. It was an age of reptilian plurality. Many forms thrived simultaneously, each exploiting different strategies. Only later, under new environmental pressures, would dinosaurs emerge as the primary terrestrial rulers. The groundwork for that shift was laid during the Jurassic, through constant interaction and competition. Understanding this coexistence reveals that dominance is rarely absolute. It is negotiated through adaptation, environment, and time. Dinosaurs did not conquer a world of weak rivals. They emerged from a crowded field of powerful competitors. The Jurassic landscape was shaped by this tension. Every step, hunt, and migration occurred in a world where multiple giants competed for survival. Evolution advanced through this pressure. This prolonged competition forged resilience. Those that survived were tested repeatedly. Dinosaurs proved adaptable, but they did so alongside other formidable reptiles. The story of dinosaurs rising cannot be separated from the story of those they lived beside. Their success was built in a shared world, shaped by rivalry rather than isolation. The Jurassic was not a simple prelude to dinosaur dominance. It was a complex chapter where many giants shared the stage, and for millions of years, no single group ruled alone. Through fire, flood, drought, and ash, life persisted. Ecosystems collapsed and reformed. Giants fell and rose again. The Jurassic world was shaped as much by catastrophe as by abundance. To understand Jurassic dominance is to accept this contradiction. Life thrived not because disaster was absent, but because it was constant. Adaptation flourished under pressure. These disasters did not weaken reptilian rule. They forged it. Each survival carried lessons written into genes. Each collapse refined the system further. The age of giant reptiles endured because it could absorb loss. Death was widespread, but extinction was selective. The planet tested its rulers repeatedly, and for millions of years they passed. This was the harsh balance of the Jurassic. Abundance followed devastation. Life rebuilt itself again and again. And through every cycle of destruction and renewal, giant reptiles remained at the center of the world. The dominance of giant reptiles did not end suddenly. It faded slowly, unevenly, and quietly across millions of years. The decline was not a single collapse. but a gradual erosion driven by environmental change, biological limits, and shifting evolutionary advantages. Many giants survived deep into the Jurassic and beyond, but the conditions that once favored extreme size and reptilian supremacy began to change. Climate was the first pressure. While the early and middle Jurassic were marked by stable warmth, later periods became increasingly variable. Temperature swings grew more pronounced, rainfall patterns shifted. Some regions became drier, others more seasonal. Stability gave way to unpredictability, and this challenged animals dependent on constant abundance. Large reptiles required enormous resources. Massive bodies needed continuous access to food and water. When vegetation patterns shifted or seasonal shortages appeared, giants were affected first. Smaller, more flexible species could adjust diets or migrate more easily. Size, once an advantage, became a liability under changing conditions. Continental drift intensified this effect. As Pangaea continued to fragment, ecosystems became increasingly isolated. Land bridges disappeared. Migration routes were cut off. Populations that once ranged across vast continuous territories became confined to smaller regions. Isolation reduced genetic diversity and increased vulnerability to local disasters. Habitat fragmentation reshaped food availability. Forests broke into patches. Wetlands shrank or disappeared. Coastlines changed rapidly. Species specialized for specific environments struggled as those environments contracted or shifted. Generalists survived more easily than specialists. Reproductive strategy also influenced decline. Giant reptiles often matured slowly. Reaching reproductive age took years or decades. When environmental stress increased juvenile mortality or reduced adult lifespan, populations declined quickly. There was little margin for recovery. Predation pressure on juveniles intensified. As ecosystems changed, predators adapted to target vulnerable young more effectively. Reduced vegetation cover meant fewer hiding places. Nests became easier to locate. Even slight increases in juvenile mortality had long-term effects on population stability. Competition with more adaptable animals increased. Early mammals and increasingly successful dinosaurs exploited niches that giants could not. Mammals reproduced quickly and required fewer resources. Dinosaurs combined size with efficiency, particularly in movement and metabolism. These traits became more valuable as conditions fluctuated. Metabolic limitations played a role. While reptilian energy efficiency was beneficial in stable warmth, it became restrictive when temperature varied. Activity windows narrowed, feeding opportunities became less predictable. Animals that could maintain activity across wider temperature ranges gained advantage. Marine reptiles faced parallel challenges. Changes in ocean circulation altered prey distribution. Some regions experienced reduced productivity. Deep water oxygen levels fluctuated. Large marine predators dependent on abundant fish and squid were affected indirectly as food webs shifted. Sea level changes continued to reshape coastal habitats. Shallow seas that once supported rich marine life drained away in some regions. Nesting and hunting grounds disappeared. Marine reptiles adapted, but not all could keep pace with rapid change. Flying reptiles were affected by atmospheric shifts, wind patterns altered, Storm frequency increased. Thermal availability changed. Large wingspans that once allowed effortless soaring became harder to support in unstable air. Smaller flyers adapted more easily. Disease became a greater factor. Environmental stress, weakened immune systems, crowded populations in shrinking habitats facilitated transmission. Outbreaks reduced numbers rapidly, especially among long-lived species with slow reproduction. Evolutionary innovation slowed among giants. Extreme size, limited developmental flexibility, structural changes required to adapt to new conditions were constrained by physics. Smaller animals evolved faster, adapting generation by generation. Behavioral rigidity also mattered. Migration routes established over millions of years became ineffective as landscapes changed. Animals returning to traditional nesting sites found them unsuitable or destroyed. Those unable to adjust failed to reproduce successfully. Predators dependent on large prey suffered as herbivore populations declined. This created cascading effects. Food chains shortened, ecosystems simplified. Giants required complex systems to sustain them. When those systems weakened, giants declined first. This decline was not uniform. Some giant reptiles persisted regionally for long periods. Refuges with stable climate and abundant resources supported them longer. However, these refuges shrank over time, isolating populations further. Fossil records show gradual disappearance rather than abrupt loss. Species diversity decreased. Body sizes trended downward in many lineages. Specialization increased briefly before extinction, a common pattern under stress. The decline of giants opened ecological space. Smaller reptiles, dinosaurs, mammals, and eventually birds expanded into these niches. Ecosystems reorganized. Energy flow shifted toward faster reproducing, more adaptable species. Yet, the giants did not vanish without legacy. Their influence shaped environments long after their numbers declined. Landscapes, altered by their feeding patterns, persisted. Evolutionary pressure they exerted left lasting marks on prey species. Some adaptations endured. Efficient lungs, egg-laying strategies, and certain skeletal designs persisted in descendant lineages. Decline did not mean failure. It meant transition. The slow decline highlights an important truth. Dominance is temporary. Environmental conditions determine success more than strength alone. When conditions change, advantages reverse. The Jurassic world that once favored giants evolved into a world that favored flexibility. Survival shifted from size and power to speed, adaptability, and resilience. This transition took millions of years. No single generation witnessed the end of giant reptiles. Populations dwindled gradually, species by species, region by region. The age of giants did not end in spectacle. It ended in silence. Fewer nests, fewer tracks, empty territories once ruled by massive forms. Yet this decline was not the end of reptilian success. It was the end of one strategy. Others continued. Reptiles remained diverse and widespread. The world moved on, shaped by new pressures and new rulers. But the memory of giants remained etched in stone. The slow decline of giant reptiles reminds us that evolution has no loyalty. It rewards what works now, not what worked before. Size, once the ultimate solution, became an obstacle. The environment changed the rules, and only those who adapted survived. This was the closing phase of reptilian dominance, not marked by catastrophe, but by transition, a long farewell rather than a sudden fall. And as the giants faded, they left behind a transformed planet, ready for the next chapter in the history of life. The legacy of the Jurassic giants did not end with their disappearance. Long after their numbers declined and their dominance faded, the influence of giant reptiles continued to shape life on Earth. Their presence altered landscapes, redirected evolution, and established patterns that persist to this day. Extinction removed the bodies, but not the consequences of their reign. Giant reptiles were ecosystem engineers. Through feeding, movement, and sheer mass, they reshaped environments on a scale unmatched by smaller animals. Forests were opened by constant browsing. Migration paths became permanent features etched into the land. Riverbanks were trampled and widened, but soil was compacted, redistributed, and fertilized. These changes did not vanish when the giants declined. They defined habitats for millions of years afterward. Vegetation evolved under pressure from massive herbivores. Plants that survived developed traits such as rapid regrowth, tough leaves, chemical defenses, and resilient root systems. These adaptations persisted and later shaped plant-animal interactions long after the giants were gone. Modern plant defenses trace part of their origin to this prolonged pressure. Predators evolved in response as well. Speed, coordination, sensory awareness, and hunting efficiency were refined through generations of competition with large, powerful prey. These traits did not disappear. They were inherited and adapted by later carnivores, including dinosaurs that rose to prominence afterward. The structure of food webs was permanently altered. Energy flow during the Jurassic favored large body size and long lifespans. After the decline, ecosystems reorganized around smaller, faster reproducing animals. However, the complexity created by the giants remained. Layered food chains, migratory dynamics, and predator-prey balance had been refined during their reign. Marine ecosystems were equally shaped. Giant marine reptiles influenced prey distribution, ocean productivity, and nutrient cycling. Their deaths fed deep-sea ecosystems, establishing energy pathways that continued even after they disappeared. Modern marine food webs still reflect these ancient structures. The skies also retained their legacy. Flying reptiles demonstrated that large animals could master flight through efficiency rather than constant power. Their success set the stage for later aerial life. When birds eventually expanded, they inherited a world already tested by large-scale flight. The evolutionary experiments of the Jurassic provided templates. Limb posture, lung efficiency, egg structures, and growth strategies refined during this time were reused, modified, and improved by later species. Evolution rarely starts from nothing. It builds on what already works. Fossils preserve this legacy in detail. Trackways reveal how giants moved and interacted with their environment. Bite marks tell stories of conflict and survival. Nesting sites reveal reproductive strategies refined through pressure. These records allow reconstruction not just of bodies, but of behavior and ecosystem function. Modern reptiles carry echoes of their giant ancestors. Crocodilians retain efficient lungs, powerful bites, and ambush strategies shaped during the Age of Giants. Lizards and turtles preserve egg-laying strategies and metabolic efficiency refined long ago. These traits remain effective because they were tested under extreme conditions. Even mammals benefited indirectly. Early mammals survived by avoiding competition with giants, becoming nocturnal, small, and flexible. These traits later allowed rapid expansion when giant reptiles declined. Mammalian success was shaped by adaptation to a world dominated by reptiles. The legacy of giants also lies in limitation. Their decline demonstrated that no strategy is permanent. Size alone cannot guarantee survival when environments change. This lesson is written repeatedly in the fossil record and remains relevant today. Geological records show how giant reptiles influenced sediment distribution, erosion patterns, and even carbon cycling. Their feeding and waste contributed to long-term changes in soil composition and atmospheric chemistry. Life altered the planet, not just adapted to it. Cultural legacy exists as well. Long before scientific understanding, fossilized bones inspired myths of dragons and monsters. Even today, giant reptiles dominate human imagination. This fascination reflects recognition of their unmatched presence in Earth's history. The scientific legacy continues to grow. Each new fossil discovery refines understanding of evolution, climate interaction, and ecosystem dynamics. Giant reptiles serve as case studies for how life responds to abundance, stability, and later stress. The Jurassic giants also provide perspective on modern environmental change. They thrived during greenhouse conditions and declined as variability increased. Their story offers insight into how large animals respond to climate shifts, habitat fragmentation, and resource instability. Extinction did not erase their influence. Ecosystems that followed were shaped by absence as much as presence. Empty niches drove innovation. New rulers emerged, but they inherited a world already transformed. The memory of giants is preserved in rock layers across every continent. Their fossils link continents that once formed Pangaea. Their distribution records the movement of the Earth itself. Biology and geology are inseparable in their story. The Jurassic was a peak of reptilian possibility. Land, sea, and sky were all conquered simultaneously. This convergence has never been repeated. Later periods saw dominance in one realm or another, but never all at once. This uniqueness is part of their legacy. The Age of Giants represents an extreme outcome of evolution under favorable conditions. It shows what life can achieve when constraints are removed. The end of their dominance marked transition, not failure. Life shifted strategy. Complexity remained. Diversity increased. The planet continued to evolve. Today, the influence of Jurassic giants survives in structure, function, and memory. They shaped the rules by which later life played. Every ecosystem that followed carried traces of their reign. Their story reminds us that life is not static. Dominance rises, stabilizes, and fades. What remains is impact. The Jurassic giants ruled for tens of millions of years, longer than humanity has existed. Their legacy is measured not in survival alone, but in transformation. To study them is to understand how deeply life can shape a planet, not just through survival, but through dominance, adaptation, and eventual transition. Their bones rest in silence, but their influence continues in forests, oceans, skies, and stone. The mark of the Jurassic giants endures. This is their final legacy. Not extinction, but imprint. A world forever changed by the age when reptiles ruled everything.